evening, everyone. Welcome to this exciting session where we are going to talk about energy in transition. What are the alternate energies, energy storage? It's a panel discussion. And we have got Anil, one of the most active Thai member in Hyderabad, and who comes from a very long background in tech and tech related stuff. He founded Great Sports Tech in the year 2004, and it's last years. Now they are in the last 17 years, they are now across 8 countries, and they have created prestigious product under the sport infrastructure and all. And Anil is a first generation entrepreneur. Not only that, they were successful in getting awarded the top India's 100 SMEs out of 49,000 nomination, which was a big feather in the cap, and also the best professional services in sports. Earlier to this, he has worked in Wipro and Ramco Systems, both in India and US. And he has his engineering plus MBA degree, and later, like any great entrepreneurs in the making, had done his executive development program from Kellogg School of Management. With that, I will hand it over to you, Anil. Please take it forward. And it's great to have you, Radhika and Vasudha.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raj. Wonderful. I appreciate the introduction. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening. Everyone joining in from different parts of the world, and a very warm welcome to you for this exciting session on energy transition, energy storage, and transmission. We have the panel discussion for about 40 minutes, and then about 10 to 15 minutes for any Q&A. So please post your questions as the discussion goes on, and I'll try and cover as many as I can at the end of the session. So getting back to the topic itself, renewable energy capacity is set to expand 50% by 2024, led by solar energy. This is according to the International Energy Agency and their Renewable 2020 report, which found that solar, wind, and hydropower projects are rolling out at their fastest rate in over 4 years, making for the argument that the future lies in using renewable energy. Renewable energy sources make up 26% of the world's electricity today. And according to IEA, its share is expected to exceed 30% by 2024. Considering that conventional energy sources, especially electricity from coal, has been around for over 150 years, it is indeed great achievement that renewable energy is quickly reaching almost 1/3 share of this total energy production. And the IEA report also says that the solar energy will account for 60% of the predicted renewable growth, primarily due to its accessibility. So solar facilities will continue to reducing their variability rates by storing electricity during the day and running at night. Commercial and residential buildings will keep running at full capacity even in periods of low sunlight. So closing the gap between the sunlight collection and the electricity generation, which will spur residents and corporations to join the solar movement. So therefore, it's imperative for governments to implement incentive and remuneration schemes, as well as very effective regulation policies. For example, California, as some of you may be aware, had mandated that after 2020, solar panels must be installed on new homes and buildings of up to 3 stories. And more recently proposed that even commercial buildings and high-rise residential apartments should have solar power and battery storage. So this is a trend that quite likely that the other states and countries are likely to follow very soon. And it's not just about solar. Onshore wind energy capacity is likely to increase 57% by 2024. So also hydropower, which remains the world's primary source of renewable power in 2024, that's set to increase 9% over the forecast period, primarily led by China, India, and Brazil. Geothermal capacity, again, is predicted to increase 28%. So the future clearly lies in using renewable energy. And it will continue to rise in the upcoming decade, edging out fossil fuels and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So this is a very pivotal time. It clearly appears that we are at an inflection point of energy transition from fossil-based conventional sources to renewable zero carbon or carbon neutral energy. So with this perspective, considering how important this topic is, keeping in line with the theme of the Thai Sustainability Summit, so we sought the views and insights of 2 of the best experts in this space. So I'd like to welcome to our panel discussion Ms. Vasudha Madhavan and Ms. Radhika Choudary. And welcome to the panel once again, ladies. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to just briefly introduce both of them. Vasudha is the founder of Ostara Advisors, India's first electric mobility and sustainability focused investment bank. She has over 18 years of experience in corporate and investment banking across Citibank, ICICI Bank, and boutique investment banks, and made her debut on the India M&A League tables in late 2018. Marquee deals include advising on India's first electric vehicle two-wheeler M&A, where she represented Greaves Cotton Limited on their acquisition of pioneering EV 2W maker two-wheeler Ampere vehicles, and raising Silicon Valley funding for India's largest battery intelligence software and BMS player, ION Energy. I don't know if it's pronounced Ion Energy or Ion Energy or ION.
Ion.
Anyway, you can Ion. Okay. So Vasudha is a commerce graduate from Mount Carmel College, Bangalore, and holds an MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur. She is an advanced scuba diver and travel photographer. So welcome once again, Vasudha. Happy to have you on the panel here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. And Ms. Radhika Choudary, she's a dynamic entrepreneur with over 14 years of experience in the field of solar energy. She is the co-founder and director of Freyr Energy Service. She brings with her a futuristic perspective, especially when creating a positive impact on the environment through her expertise in solar. With an aim to make solar energy accessible and affordable to all, Ms. Radhika co-founded Freyr Energy, a fully integrated solar company providing solar solutions for homeowners, businesses, and communities. In 2017, she was a recipient of the Femina World Women Leadership Award for Excellence in Power and Energy Sector, and the Women Entrepreneur Quest recipient. Radhika is an alumnus of Purdue University, USA, where she completed her MS in nuclear energy and has a BE in mechanical engineering from Osmania University. Incidentally, my alma mater as well. So Radhika, you're a junior to me from engineering college. So she recently also completed a one-year seed transformation program with the Stanford Graduate School of Business. So welcome once again, Radhika. So with this preamble and in the introduction, I'll just dive into the question straight away. I'm sure the audience is eager to understand more about this subject. So I'll start with the Vasudha question for you, please. You know, as an investor in this renewable energy, clean tech, and electric mobility space, you must certainly have a bird's eye view of how the space is evolving. So what is your take on the way the industry is growing, its positive impact on the environment, and its financial viability as well?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, there is over the last probably 3 to 4 years, I have in my career seen huge tailwinds in the direction of usage of renewable energy and also its multiple applications. For instance, I'll just take the case in point of electric mobility, which is probably the one area that I know, that I'm intimately involved with. And what we've seen is, now more and more it's becoming common to have, specific use cases like logistics or fleets or even personal mobility happening on vehicles which are run on batteries, right? And plug-in charging vehicles. And that, because it enables or it necessitates innovations on the battery technology front, also makes a huge difference to how energy is stored and how renewable energy is going to be used. So there is, in a sense, the use of energy in the form of mobility or in the form of other uses is driving the transition of newer energy modes, because there is now, of course, greater demand. And that greater demand and innovation dollars that are going into these areas are driving newer ways for you to store, harness, and use that energy. And electric mobility is probably one of them. We'll talk in greater detail as the session goes on. But that's just an overview of how some of these changes are happening.
Wonderful to know. Thank you. So can you provide a snapshot of India's power generation and the installed capacity as it stands today,
Sure.
as well as the share of renewable or alternative energy sources in this installed capacity? And again, as a follow-up to that, what is India's energy demand expected to be, say, 8 or 10 years from now? And what is the estimated share of thermal and renewable energy sources in that future energy mix?
Right. So I'm going to throw a whole lot of data at you now. The question has a lot of information packed into it. So just to give you a sense, right? India's total installed capacity, which is our power plants and all of our renewable sources of energy, in total stand at about 384 gigawatt hour of energy. Just to put that in perspective, an average two-bedroom home in India would probably be having a sanctioned load of about 5 kilowatt hour, for instance. So you are talking about 384 gigawatt hour of installed capacity, and that is split 60-40 currently between thermal energy capacity and renewable energy capacity, right? This is as per the Indian Power Ministry data. And what that essentially means is that is what we have in terms of capacity. Now, what do we generate from it is where we are, that stands at about 1600 terawatt hour, which in the last recorded data that I could find. And that means that is what we are actually generating across renewable and thermal sources. And so 1600 terawatt hour, right? So where we are in terms of the breakup between thermal and renewable is fairly encouraging in terms of progress we've already made. So India has been adding a lot of renewable capacity, and we are reading many large companies adding to that in terms of solar, wind, hydro was always there, but also now newer sources like hydrogen coming in. All of these are going to contribute to larger share of renewable as we go from here. So the 60-40 is expected to reach 50-48 in about 7 to 8 years. So if you look at about the 2030 time frame. And within, I'll also give you a snapshot of that. So within the 40% currently, which is renewable energy, the breakup of that, about 19.75% or about 20 odd percent is really bio or rather biomass and other sources. The largest, probably the largest segment is solar, which is about 11. Actually, solar is about 11%. And then we have hydropower, which is looking at about 14% or so of the renewable energy. This is, I'm only talking about the installed capacity. And it often happens, and that's probably why energy storage is important, and all of that, is that when you're talking about renewable energy, it is not always constant generation. Because given that these are natural sources of energy, generation often tends to fluctuate, and hence necessitates the need for energy storage.
I understand. No, this is really very interesting to know. I mean, both the outlook, which is seemingly very promising, as well as some of the challenges, and of course the uncertainties, like you rightly mentioned. But I guess that's part and parcel of what it's going to be with the renewable energy, and of course with the energy storage also developing on its own. I'm sure that has a solution, a right solution for how we are able to temper those fluctuations and uncertainties. So that's a very good information that you shared there, Vasudha. Thank you. Over to Radhika. Just wanted to understand from you. So Freyr Energy is in the news, really for a lot of good reasons. So what does Freyr Energy do, and how have you disrupted the market through your innovations, and how does it contribute to Freyr's success? We are all really very eager to know.
Hi, Anil. So yeah, I think Vasudha made very good points about the snapshot of the energy sector. As you see that it's growing at a rampant speed. If you really look at solar, though it is contributing to 10% of the total energy mix today, it's still lagging behind where the government had set targets. It had said, there was about 4-5 years back, they said we should do 100 gigawatts of solar by 2022, and we are only barely halfway there. We are only at 47 gigawatts today cumulative capacity. And if you really look at it, from the time Freyr Energy, so Freyr Energy is about a 7-year-old company. We started this in 2014. And I think, like I said, I was in the sector for more than 13 years now. And from the day the National Solar Mission was launched, and the solar pricing was upwards of 20 crores per megawatt. And today we are talking about 3.5 crores per megawatt, right? I mean, we've come a long way, just to put it in perspective where we stand today. Also, the per capita consumption today in India is about 1200 units. I mean, even that has increased nearly tenfold in the last 50 years or 60 years, right? And this is going to continue to grow because if you compare with United States, it's about 3,500 units is the per capita consumption in the US. So here in India, we are still at 1200 units. And I think with the rural markets also transforming, getting more digitized, getting more connected, the need for energy or electricity is increasing. So Freyr is a rooftop solar company, and we acquire a customer, we kind of design the system for them, and we install. And primarily the category of customers we target are the residential homeowners, typically who have roof rights. That is the only kind of barrier, is that, do they have their roof space? And for commercial and industrial customers, right? And these are so it could be hospitals, schools, colleges, it could be petrol pumps, anybody who needs electricity pretty much, right? And we've done a lot of government projects. We've electrified more than 120 villages across India between, the rural parts of Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh, very rural parts. We've done projects, even in Manipur, Sikkim. So we have presence in 22 states. So the journey started with the idea. I mean, there are a lot of solar companies in India, and it is really hard to keep up and to be able to acquire a customer. I mean, the biggest challenges today exist is that the customer is not even aware of how to go solar or what solar means for them today, right? I mean, though we still say it's not a concept sale anymore, it's commoditized, there's still a challenge where customer doesn't know how to go solar because there are no big brands out there. There are a lot of mom and pops across the country. And, if I'm in Hyderabad, I'm a Hyderabad-based company, how do you reach a customer that is pan-India because electricity is required across the country, and how do you reach? So the way we've disrupted this market is twofold. One is instead of having the traditional dealer distributor model where, it's a lot of physical presence and you need to have brick and mortar approach, we said we'll do away with that. And we've developed technology in-house where I'm able to give this technology, which is an app. It's a simple app. It's a very simple program for training my dealers or channel partners, as we call them. I can onboard a channel partner from any part of the country and educate them, train them, and without any solar background, they can start selling solar systems on my behalf from that day. And the entire proposal generation is through that, the pricing, everything. So that's the way we've disrupted. So if you really look at it, there are about 3,000 cities and towns and villages in the country. And how do you have presence across all that? And, today we are in a digital phase, and we have disrupted the market that way. And one more interesting investment we made recently into technology again was we've developed an app. It's called SunPro Plus. It is for the end consumer. As a customer, if you're a homeowner or a business owner, you can download this app and you can start your solar journey. From the time you want to evaluate what is solar for you and what would it cost, and you decide to go for solar, the entire design is kind of communicated through the app. All your questions are clarified through that. We just give you a proposal so that you accept it. The payment is through the portal, and then the system is installed. So you kind of see the order progression, and after it's installed, you can also look at the generation. So we kind of hook up a remote monitoring system, so you can also see how the system is performing. So it's kind of very streamlined. If there is a service request, you can put it through the app. So we kind of digitize the customer journey, and the vision is that anybody, if out of a tier 2, tier 3 town, has the same customer experience with going solar.
Very nice, really, really very innovative. So you're clearly addressing the education and awareness challenge, as well as breaking down the distance barrier that way with both of these innovations. So really very nice to hear about those. Just a follow-up question to that. So how do you see the future of solar power generation, both in India as well as globally? And certainly there are many challenges that people do talk about, and like you rightly said, how the setup cost has significantly come down from what it was, you're talking about maybe 80% lesser than what it was, say, 12, 13 years ago. So nevertheless, what challenges do you anticipate the industry to encounter before solar energy becomes more mainstream, more affordable and reliable?
That's a good question. So I think solar is on the path of its growth right now, and it genuinely doesn't need any more like government incentives or support honestly, it's, I many times forget that it's renewable and that it is about going green. I always pitch that it is a product you should invest in because the ROI is very high. It's actually a fantastic, you have a 30-35% ROI on a product like solar. I don't think any other instrument kind of gives you that. So if you really look at it now, with the way the costs have gone down, the residential market has picked up hugely. I mean, just to put it in perspective, what solar I have done for residential the entire year, I have already completed in 2 months. So that is the pace at which the residential home orders are coming in. And I think there's a lot to do with even subsidy. I mean, honestly, I don't even know why they have subsidy, but you don't even need subsidy anymore. But that becomes like, the government is also trying to do their bit by encouraging homeowners to go solar. And I think that is going to continue to grow. And it is going to be like, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times growth today. And I think with COVID, a lot of people are working from home. People who paid 1,500, 1,000 rupee electricity bills never felt the pinch till they saw 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 rupee electricity bills today. And, the immediate awareness has come in, and if they're seeing in the neighborhood, then they feel like, it's time to go solar now. So I think it's going to progress. And even if you really look at the Western world, United States and all, or even for that matter, Australia, their whole market started off with residential as a big market. Later on, they talked about community solar, large scale solar, Walmart going solar, the rooftop solar was much later. The residential solar was what took off very well. And I think the drivers in the United States primarily, or in any other, developed world, in Europe for that matter, has been the financing instruments. I think in India, we are still struggling with the very basic products for for a residential homeowner or an MSME to go solar. It's still a big challenge. And I think that gap, if we can address it systematically, I mean, there is a lot of money that has come to banks, everybody wants to do it, but there is no systematic product that is out there where, a customer wants to go solar. And we've included a lot of these things in our app also. Let's say if a customer wants to go solar, we've tied up with the RBL Bank for residential customers. So we kind of pre-approve, the customer kind of knows what their EMI payment is. And now with a 3 to 5 year term of payment, your electricity bill is almost same or less than the EMI. So your EMI payment kind of, so for 3 years you pay it and you're done. After that, the electricity is kind of free. So it's reached that point where this is going to disrupt the market and it's going to continue to grow. I think the challenges are primarily around, I think also local manufacturing capacity is lacking today. And a lot of companies have been investing in manufacturing, Adani's of the world, Vikram Solar, Wari has been expanding. Reliance has acquired one of the largest solar companies, RECs. And, so I think the future is going to look bright, and this is the growth phase right now.
Wonderful. That it's really very heartening to hear that, an industry that just some years ago seemed like it would be struggling to really establish itself, that today an entrepreneur in that industry says that we really don't need any incentives or any other support from the government necessarily. Not that you wouldn't welcome it, but it's a great reflection on how the industry suddenly turned around and able to stand on its own feet. And I'm sure it's a great future, like you rightly described. Just moving over from solar power over to the role of electric mobility. So Vasudha, this is more probably your area. So what do you feel is the role of electric mobility in the energy grid, and how does electric mobility cause a transition in India's energy resources and requirement?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I work intensively with electric mobility startups, and one of the important challenges has been, and we, in electric mobility, we will not say we don't need subsidy. That whole transition is definitely being enabled to a large extent because it is, of course, at a nascent stage. It is being enabled a lot by policy push. And really positive, steps being taken there by both the central government and the various state governments across the country. What I do is essentially work with multiple startups, and we are engaging with multiple global investors to have them come in and participate and really oil the wheel, so to speak, of the electric mobility ecosystem. There is a lot of great work happening within this space with startups across the gamut of two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, companies starting to make that, as well as technologies like alternate battery technologies, recycling of lithium-ion batteries. There are also startups working in the areas of last mile mobility, whether it is logistics or it is passenger last mile shared mobility. As well as startups working in the area of financing, because you're also looking at uh, providing loans and creating consumer financing offerings for a whole new set of products, including all of these that I mentioned. So a lot of it is increased and grown through the support of financing. So all of those areas are seeing huge amounts of transition. We also have startups working in alternate battery technologies, which are innovating on the lithium-ion battery technology that we all have started to take for granted as the most common, most commercialized, most stable battery technology that we know. There are innovations happening there as well. All of these are leading to a transition in the entire automotive industry in India, and which we know we know that the automotive industry is about 7% of the GDP, about 180 billion or so that it contributes to the GDP. And this whole industry is in the throes of, or is starting stage of a pretty huge disruption. And the other thing that it therefore disrupts is the whole energy industry as well. From whatever I have read, and this is, I guess, an important sort of an aspect to how electric mobility starts to get adopted, is that the whole cycle of, firstly, the whole cycle of electric mobility needs to be clean, which means that the sources of power that are used to power your vehicles need to be larger and larger share of coming from renewable sources. And then, you also need to look at end of life batteries, etc., where you need to recycle some of these in order to create pure raw materials out of that you can then reuse, thereby making the entire cycle of using electric mobility clean and sustainable. The impact on the energy grid, from what I understand, is that it is going to definitely increase demand. The demand is expected to grow at about just over 6% year on year over the next few years ending this decade. However, what is more important and what is more, what's probably a greater challenge is how do we create access to energy so that every common man on the street and can access charging stations, right, and can access ways to charge his or her vehicle, and to whether it's for personal mobility or it is for fleet and business. And that is really what we are talking about. Again, India is now fully electrified, so sources of electricity are available. It's about innovating how we can get these sources of energy into every home or into every residential cluster, into every commercial area like a mall or a large parking lot in the middle of the market CBD. So that's really what the challenge now is in terms of increasing access to energy.
Understand. So what is the vehicle to grid integration, and how would that work in India?
So vehicle to grid integration is actually a slightly futuristic concept, and not probably, it'll take a while for it to really happen here. But essentially what happens is that if you have battery-operated vehicles, right, whether it's a four-wheeler or a three-wheeler or even masses and masses of two-wheelers. And India, you must know, is a 75% a two-wheeler market. We sell about 25 4 million or so, 22 to 24 million vehicles a year, and 75% of those are two-wheelers. And then comes three-wheelers, and then comes passenger vehicles, and then comes passenger four-wheelers, and then comes heavy commercial vehicles. So two-wheelers really form a very large chunk of the mobility market in India. And when you talk about vehicle to grid integration, you're really talking about a scenario where you have the main utility or the main electric grid, which is distributing energy to all the homes and commercial buildings, etc., across every city and across the state. And you are talking about every personal mobility vehicle or a car which stores energy in a battery inside the vehicle, contributing back to the grid. Right, so you're really talking about a scenario where you have two-way a movement of energy between the vehicle and the utility and the grid, really. So, and that is an interesting concept to imagine, because when you're driving an electric car, you're essentially, if you have a 60 kilowatt battery or a 70 kilowatt battery, you're actually carrying that much power. So it is possible that if you don't need it, or if you can actually buy it or charge your car when the peak rates are low, and give it back to the grid when the peak rates are high, because you're also helping in balancing the grid. Now, what this requires is a fair bit of innovation and use of technology and integration of grid infrastructure. So for this to happen, we need the grid to not only be fully integrated and sort of connected to within the grid system, but also to be open to quote unquote APIs coming in from smaller sort of setups or other sources of battery energy, which can actually feed back into the grid. That is both it's a geographical as well as a technological challenge, but it will be something, definitely a story of the future.
Certainly, it does sound very futuristic. I mean, at most we've heard until now about fixed solar systems that may be feeding back to the grid, but this is a completely new take on how a mobile battery could possibly feed back to the grid and be selective in terms of when it would draw power and when it would credit back power, perhaps, from what you described. Really very interesting. But talking of energy storage, Radhika, just wanted to understand your thoughts on recent innovations and developments in the energy storage space, and how do you see energy storage and electric vehicles impacting the solar powered battery industry in general? And again, Vasudha, you may also want to weigh in with your opinion on this as well later.
Yeah, so I think everybody's talking about energy storage now, and I think like Vasudha rightly pointed out, renewable energy is seasonal, or it's natural sources, so it becomes very hard to generate electricity when you actually need it during peak hours, right? So that's where the whole concept of battery is kind of coming into play. So I think even about 8 to 10 years back, battery like lithium-ion batteries were about $1,000 a kilowatt hour, and now you're talking about less than $150 a kilowatt hour. So the pricing has also come down drastically. It's more affordable. A lot of governments are putting in battery requirements with lithium-ion batteries, and we have also done a lot of those projects in the rural part of India. So it's a trend in the urban cities. If you really look, the storage requirement has come down drastically over the last few years because the grid has been reasonably stable. So today, when you're talking about homes or businesses, barely any systems are sold with battery storage. You typically offer a battery storage only, ideally when you have at least 4 hours of power cut every day, or 2 to 4 hours of power cut, that is when you kind of give a solution with battery. So the last few years, if you see, the storage requirements have come down traditionally in the urban cities and requirements. So the other thing is that is evolving is, of course, we've done microgrids. So you're talking about all these batteries having a life of almost 8 to 10 years. If you look at the cycles that the warranty comes with, it's about 10 years compared to the traditional LMLA batteries, or the batteries are typically 2 to 3 years, 5 years maximum is the life, right? So now you're talking about the life increasing. And I think electric mobility it's the infrastructure is obviously way behind what we intend to do. If you want one thing, the other thing has to be in place. So it's like a chicken and egg game. You know, the infrastructure has to be set up for the uptake of vehicle sales on the e-mobility. And I think there's a huge opportunity there where, you know, setting up a charging station, a network of where the charging stations are so people know what's happening. There has to be battery management systems in place because we want to know where the levels of charge are available or at any given point in time. And, you know, even apartment communities I'm seeing currently are all offering with the charging station in the parking lot, all of the new apartment complexes. And I think they are going to retrofit in the old apartment complexes also from the association. So this is going to revolutionize, and I think there is a huge future to energy storage. And like I said, there is in the US and other places, batteries have taken off. Like, you know, if you talk about the Tesla batteries that are being used, what is the reason, right? It's not like grid is not stable there. Why do they have batteries? I mean, it's more like you're self-sufficient with battery because end of the day, when you come home, you're still consuming from the battery that has been charged through the day with the solar. Or even the grid has the capability or the utility has the option to draw some units of electricity in case there is a demand, right? That is like a long-term plan and vision if we can ever execute something like that, where the government is also saying, okay, fine, this battery is fully stored, it is in Villa A, and I can kind of probably pull out that battery because somebody else needs it. That is where the community solar is also becoming big, where even in Andhra Pradesh, and one of the first states to have implemented where the farmers, if you look for solar water pumping, there is so much conversation about solar water pumping at a farmer level. If you look at a farmer that he or she, they're not using it beyond 100 days in 365 days. What is that asset sitting idle, right? So they said we will connect it to the grid, and every time, you know, the plant is sitting idle, it is actually giving power to the grid. So these are all the different things that are happening at different levels.
Amazing, really. I mean, the fact that you could, if there is a network enough to draw any idle power, you know, in apartment complexes or even from a farm and back to the grid, this is just brilliant. I think really very exciting to, you know, visualize how the future is going to be. Vasudha, you may have some thoughts on the energy storage side as well, perhaps.
Yeah, so essentially, we all hope that, you know, such a thing can happen. But what is happening right now on the ground, and this also impacts, you know, how electric mobility is taking off or is being adopted by the common man, is therefore the need of using excess power or idle power in residential complexes and putting them to use in the form of charging points. And this has in fact been quite a topic of conversation, and even the policy makers and think tanks that have designed the EV charging rollout reports for various states and at the central level have actually got this challenge to solve, which is how do you make sure that everywhere you can actually pull out idle power and set up infrastructure. But it is starting to happen. So when you talk about storage, right, and this is probably every home, and Radhika knows this best, that you know, essentially microgrids are a very interesting concept, and they work best when you have, essentially the concept is that you're having these localized clusters of energy generation and storage and usage. So you are able to, if you have a cluster of homes or a cluster of buildings that have rooftop solar and therefore can either store it as a small group, or, you know, or a community. That really, I definitely think we need more of those. If you look at some of the models that exist globally, we have seen that microgrids are used in, you know, universities, in you know, in different kinds of setups around the world. You know, US, for instance, has hospital microgrids where advanced microgrid controller is able to optimize and synchronize the various pieces of energy equipment, which allows the microgrid to reliably deploy assets 24/7 in a way that it provides energy when it is needed most to serve the hospital's needs. So they have some interesting use cases, research facilities in some of the universities, which actually have a microgrid that, you know, that essentially what it does, it creates greater certainty of power source. So even when you do have, you know, a down, you know, you are not getting a reliable or a grid source of electricity, you can always fall back onto your microgrid source. Of course, smart cities and communities which are coming up not just across the world but also in India are thinking of putting up microgrids as storage facilities or distributed energy management infrastructure. This again, like I spoke about vehicle grid integration, also requires a heavy use of technology to harness and connect these smaller mini grids or microgrids back into the main grid. But if it can be done, and it can be done, and there are several startups now starting to look at doing this, it is going to be definitely a very interesting use of energy, and it will add to our energy efficiency and energy self-sufficiency, so to speak. So we have a long way to go, but I highly recommend that as policy and as industry, we look at mini grids across cities and towns and villages as an important source of energy.
Actually,
Wonderful. Thank you.
point,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
if you really look at countrywide, there is no dearth of electricity, right? There's no generation shortage. It's all about when it's produced and when it's consumed. There is a mismatch around that. And storage is the only way it's going to optimize a lot of it. Yeah.
I see. No, really, good to know that there is enough thought already being applied to how this can be actually balanced. There's just a lopsided distribution at the moment, but this is really good to know. I noticed that we are just a little bit running short of time. We have probably 5 minutes, so I'll jump to a couple of questions that I believe will be of a lot of interest to many in the audience listening in today. Mainly in terms
with
of
your permission, I wanted to ask one question before I jump off to another one.
Please. Yes.
And this has always been, I think we have got two good people to be. So what is the life of these equipment, be the solar panel or the setup? And I'm talking at the lowest denominator, which is, at a farmer level or at an individual house level. Because a lot of people, ask this, hey, what is, does this run and how it runs and how long it will run?
That's a good question. So the life of panels is between 25 to 30 years. And the inverter typically comes between 5 to 10-year warranty, and you can extend the warranty as you kind of keep using it. Usually any installer gives a warranty for the entire system, including the structures, the cables and all that. 5-year warranty is given. And anything over and above that, you probably have to keep paying at the end of 5 years to extend the warranty. Like it will be part of your maintenance, and if parts are kind of damaged to it. So you're talking about a 25-year asset on your roof by going solar. And like I said, the payback is typically between 2 to 3.5 years. And so that is like every lakh you invest, you save between 25 to 35,000 rupees annually. So
thank you.
Wonderful. So I was just saying that, there may be some insights that are, many in the audience would like to know from a general perspective. So Radhika, to you, what do you see as the business opportunities, in the renewable energy sector for entrepreneurs who may be looking to invest or, have a startup in this space, both in India and even outside for that matter?
So I think the big bucks are going towards manufacturing today. Like I said, we've been importing a lot of solar panels from China, and now we are seeing way too much growth, expansion, bringing a lot of equipment for manufacturing in India. I think that's a huge space, and I think it will continue to grow, and it's a good space to be in right now. The other things that would come would be there is a lot of opportunity around charging stations. So the mapping of the charging stations will be a big deal. Like I said, we are in a time where we are not ready to wait for more than 24 hours after we pay on Amazon Prime. You want it delivered the same day or next day. So if you go to a charging station, it's all about how quickly can you charge. The supercharging capability should be there at the charging. I mean, it's something people won't wait for an hour for it to charge at its base. So there is a lot of technology that's being developed around quick charging of the electric vehicles. So there is a lot that is going on over there. And I think on technology front, again, I'm hearing a lot of startups working towards, mapping out these charging stations. So, I have an app or I have a way to know where I can go to charge my vehicle. That will be a big important gap to be filled. And there is a lot of interest by startups where, if you're not actually manufacturing anything, then that's a good space to be in. And I think for solar, a lot of Western countries have gone into getting into solar, not with the physical aspect of installing, but just customer acquisition. So if there is a smart way of acquiring end customers and giving that database to the installers, like, likes of Freyr Energy, it will go a long way. So they are trying to be very smart. How do you engage with local customers, and how do you acquire them? How do you bring onto your platform? How do you bring the financing folks on that platform and then connect them to the EPC contractors to execute, right? So that's also an interesting model that's evolving right now. And of course, financing, right? If you are willing to start an NBFC, it's great if you're looking at financing products for solar. Yeah.
That's nice. Really looks like plenty of opportunities all around. But just in the interest of time, I think we are phase of the session now, maybe. So I have maybe just 3-4 questions, very brief responses, but very critical to, for most of the people attending the session to know. So Vasudha, to you, so do you see more startups in this space, on the lines of what Radhika was outlining? There's so many opportunities, it appears. Do you see more innovations coming in? And also, do you see significant funding coming into this sector?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Large number of startups. I know that, that may not be the comprehensive number, but at least 600 startups in the electric mobility ecosystem. And this, again, the gamut from making the vehicle to using it, to putting technology on top of it, to software, to battery management systems, to charging, swapping, what have you. So the entire you can say that the needs of the EV or the first mover advantage of the EV industry is with the startups. The incumbents are taking longer to respond to this whole wave of change, and therefore it is startups. I'll give you a sense of funding. In fact, funding has actually picked up, which is good news for a banker like me. And more than this is really an area where it is both passion and business brought into one for me in terms of encouraging financing and bringing more financing to the table. So just this month, we've had 3 or 4 deals, rather last month of September, we've had 4 significant deals where almost upwards of $200 million has been raised in this industry. For the year, I think that brings the number to about $600 odd million in funding for this year. Last year, 2020, saw about $165 million of funding raised across about 13 deals. So it was a slow year in terms of EV funding, but COVID has had a huge positive impact in terms of offtake of electric vehicles and usage. Also, given the high crude oil prices and therefore high diesel and petrol prices in the country, there is a very, very significant benefit to using an electric vehicle, and the market is seeing very fast rates of adoption. And that is also spurring investment. Yes.
Wonderful. No, good to know. So Radhika, being an insider in the industry, so to say, with a very sound business in the space. So what would be your wish list in terms of the innovations and technologies that you would like to see in the space, and how likely are those to happen? Some may just be a wish list, but what would they be if everything were possible?
Well, financing is a big thing, right? Like right now, I think, the business can double, triple if I'm able to provide end customer financing.
The answer is right next to you, though.
Yeah. So I think that's
a match made in heaven.
Yes. So in fact, I'm at the offsite and we are talking to one of the partners here also to develop these products, taking them to market. So yeah, I think that will be like a big game changer if we are able to offer financing, like a quick financing. I'm talking about turning it around instantly for a homeowner or a small business owner. And I think the domestic supply chain has to get stronger. Right now, what is happening is with a lot of the orders that we take, the government mandates that you use domestic content. And if you really look out there, you don't even have that much production here to go, and it becomes very expensive to buy domestic content. And we buy it, but the cells also have to be manufactured in India. But we don't even have that kind of capacity. So it becomes hard doing any of that. And I think the next wave will be all about recycling a lot of these products that we are installing today or we've been installing for the last 15 years. So I think that is going to be a big thing where we have a very good solution, standardized recycling of a lot of the, not just panels, but everyday, all the entire equipments also.
Understand. And Radhika, from an investment banking and M&A perspective, so how do you wish that the industry evolves over the next few years?
Vasudha. So, from what I see and the reason I got into, I started to specialize in electric mobility, renewable energy, and the whole sustainability value chain, is that it's very, the kind of, this is a specialized field. And we have found it, startups have found it quite difficult. We still continue to find it difficult at early stages to get capital. And that is because it is not still mainstream from the perspective of the capital givers or the funds or investors. And there are multiple categories of those. So the mainstream ones do still think that they have a lot of choice on their table in terms of multiple other consumer or B2B sectors that they could invest in. And this new wave of electric mobility is kind of taking a little bit of time to catch on as an investment trend. So my wish really would be that we see more of the venture capital, private equity firms starting to invest in this area. And what would help that is, of course, greater better business cases being made, better entrepreneurs coming in, and capable entrepreneurs entering this segment of energy and mobility, as well as some of the global investors that are now coming in and investing in India for the first time are kind of taking that first step, and that is very encouraging for the ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thanks, Vasudha. Just in the interest of time, there are a couple of questions from the audience, or at least a couple that we are able to take. I'll just, feel free to, whether Radhika or yourself, Vasudha, either of you can answer this. So one question is, everyone talks about hydrogen as an alternative energy in the auto sector. So why isn't it considered for power generation, or is it being considered, and where are we today on that?
Right. So, the main challenge with hydrogen has been the whole electrolyzer, the cost of electrolyzers, which has been quite high, and that has essentially meant that production of energy from and green hydrogen, so to speak, has all been a little expensive. Now we are starting to see large capital investments happen in electrolyzer plants in India. And that is the way to go about it, which is think of scale, invest significant amounts of capital, starting at a few $100 million and running into the billions. That is really what you need in order to create that kind of capacity. And once that happens, and it's starting to happen now, we will probably see the costs start to come down. That's one part of it. The other part of it is the transfer of hydrogen tends to be, because it is flammable, it tends to be slightly, the whole supply of that and the logistics of that has to be set up properly, which is something also critical for it to come into industrial use and become a larger share of our energy consumption.
So apart from of course, the inherent risks of how the technology is at the moment, you're also expecting it to probably go down the path of how the photovoltaic cell at one point was. And perhaps, Radhika, you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be big now, especially on the commercial industrial front. We've seen Reliance invest into it. I know another large company getting into this hydrogen storage, and it's for captive consumption to start off. Like she said, Vasudha mentioned about how the transportation itself is a huge challenge, and you can't keep doing a lot of this. So it has to be, byproducts are kind of being used to generate electricity.
I understand. Thank you. One other question is, of course, we may have briefly covered this, but nevertheless, you can see if there's any further thought to add on this. The question is, what are your thoughts on the energy storage by the grid? Are we going to see small installations storing energy? or an energy storage by the grid, distributed versus centralized. So I guess it comes back to your mini or microgrid that you spoke of, but anything further that you may be able to add to this audience question?
Right. So I think definitely there is a need for it, because it will create better access and harness more energy at local make it more local, and therefore reduce costs of transportation. See, the one important thing about microgrids is that on having distributed energy production or generation is that it reduces the cost of transportation, and that itself can become a, it can make it more accessible, cheaper for the masses, etc. But I think the clear focus really needs to be more renewable energy and more cleaner energy going forward. I think that is really the most critical imperative.
I understand. Thank you. So maybe we have just time for one last question to each. So maybe just in a minute each, what are your closing remarks? What message do you have for various stakeholders in this this bright sunrise industry? Maybe Radhika, you could go first, and then we can hear from Vasudha.
Well, I think the sector has a lot more to offer than just solar, and there is so much going on that I think there is opportunity for innovation, and there is a lot companies can look at doing. We can also look at engaging, because we are only focused on solar. So you can talk with companies like solar companies where some of the infrastructure is kind of set and we have the foot on the ground. We could kind of collaborate with some entrepreneurs or incubation centers where they're trying to break through, and happy to work with some of these people. Yeah, that's my last.
Wonderful, good to hear. Vasudha?
So quickly, if I just I'll talk about electric mobility. It's a $200 billion opportunity, market opportunity by 2030. So we're really looking at, even if a certain percentage, anywhere from 20 to 60, depending on the category of vehicle, is the percentage of EV adoption that happens in India over the next decade or so. The opportunity size is a couple of $100 billion. And therefore we need, and there are startups trying to solve for that, multiple users, and there are several hundred of them, like I mentioned. So the need is really for investors to come in and participate and help grow this help grow the startup ecosystem, so that we get to that 200 billion market and we can capture a larger share of that market going forward.
Wonderful. So I think we are pretty much at the end of the session. We can probably donate 1 minute back to our grid here in the whole seminar. I can see it's 5:59. So we are right in that theme. So, but fantastic insights. You'll have been just fabulous panelists, giving extremely good 360-degree insights, both into the current status as well as the future outlook. And it seems very, very promising, of course. And thank you very much. You've been fantastic, really brilliant, insights from both of you. Thank you, Radhika, and thank you, Vasudha.
Thanks, Anil.
Thanks, Anil, for being a great moderator. Thank you so much.